Good Thursday to you, everybody in God 603. Welcome again to week 5 and the review from week 4. Or I guess the review of week 4. More properly put, I'm back again. I didn't intend to wear the same sweater in this video as I did in the last, but it just worked out that way. But now, I got the merch. Gotta have that. And much better. Okay. Now I am your sufficiently caffeinated instructor. Let us take a look at last week's questions and see what you said and see if we can add something to it for you. And we'll talk just a teensy-weensy bit about the upcoming exam before we get into it. Now, as I told you, your midterm exam is in, a little bit, let's see what, a little bit under 2 weeks. Okay. I will not be putting a review sheet in the sense that I'm going to give you a list of stuff to review. But what I will do is I'll put up, sort of this is what you need to know, or this is how you prepare for the midterm exam, which is during the week of the 26th. That is towards the end of this month. Okay. To that end, this is how you need to prepare. And I realize that telling you this in this venue is, it's a little circular. One of the ways that you need to prepare for the exam is watch these videos, which again, see, I understand the circular nature of this because if you're watching these videos, you're getting this message about watching these videos, and I really don't need to be giving you that message. You understand where I'm going? Okay. But pass it on. All right. And I'll send it out in an announcement. Maybe beginning of next week. All right. So make sure you go through the discussion boards and you keep current on the videos. You watch the videos. Okay. Let's take a look at the questions from last week and see what you said and see what we can add to them. Okay. I'm including stuff intentionally that is designed, to help you as you move towards the writing and completing of your paper. That is section numero uno, which is coming up here. The due date is coming up. What is the due date on that? It's the 19th. No. All right. The exam is on the 26th and paper number 1 is on the 12th. I'm sorry, 4 days, not 19. So paper due in 4 days. Okay. So this stuff from last week is designed to help you sort of get your mind right for that. That's very cool hand Lucas. Okay. Question number 1. Sorry. Summarize Pauner's section on what a literature review is not. Of the many mistakes that Pauner covers in this section, which one have you made in a past research paper? And it's good to be aware of what you do well and what you don't do well. And then you say, hey, self, do more of this, do less of that. Joshua, you went first. Let's take you first. Pauner's what a literature review is not. Highlight some traps that many scholars and sometimes even faculty fall into when writing a literature review. Of the pitfalls he identifies, some are easier than others to prevent. He mentions the string theory. And that's an interesting way to put it, isn't it? Where each source is encompassed in a single paragraph, much like an annotated bibliography. Checkamundo, Joshua. That is probably the mistake that I see made most often. So for your purposes, for part number 1 of your paper, do not construct a literature review that is this string of paragraphs which review sources. A literature review, the name, I don't like the name. All right. Because it's not properly descriptive, because you're not reviewing literature per se. That is, the purpose of the review is not like a book review. And I think sometimes that word review that gets included in there is a little confusing. It's not a book review. Maybe a better name for a section like that would be discussion of topic, because what you're trying to do in the literature review is you're trying to set the table for what it is you're going to be dealing with. You're assuming in whatever you are studying or you propose to study, whatever you're writing about in your research paper, assume that the reader doesn't know anything All right. Now, I don't mean anything that's like they're like, duh. I mean, they don't know anything about the topic. That doesn't mean that you go on and on and on. But what that means is in a clear, complete, and concise, very important, always the middle finger. Oh, I guess the ring finger. Concise manner, you give them the background for this research topic, for this study. So that's, a literature review is you setting the table. So one of you was doing that wanted to do a proposed research design on gun violence. Okay, first of all, let's narrow that topic down. Gun violence, what? Gun violence in cities with populations above blank, gun violence in rural areas, gun violence at school, gun violence with states with restrictive gun laws, gun violence states with non-restrictive gun laws, gun violence what? So let's just, hypothetically, I'm not telling the person whose topic this is what to do, but hypothetically, let's say your research topic is gun violence in states that have restrictive gun laws. Okay. The way you start your literature review is you're going to have to give us a little bit of the history of gun laws in states and gun violence in states, and are you researching this topic just within, say, like 2023, or are you looking from 2024 back to 2020? All right, the last 25 years. Okay, then you need to give us the development of those trends, the laws and the violence and whatever over that period of time. You need to include, depending on what your methodology is, a little bit about the methodology that has been used to study this issue. Why this methodology opposed to that? So you're setting the table. That's what you're doing for the audience, for the reader. For you, you're making sure that there's no other really way to put it, that you know what the heck you're talking about. It's a good thing to be reading up and researching a topic and have a eureka moment, like Euripides, the great Greek mathematician who is said to have jumped out of his bathtub and said, Eureka. All right. That's great. But what's not great is if you have an aha about something that's already known, and then you write it and you go, yeah, look what I discovered. And the rest of the scholarly audience is like, yeah, dude, we've known that for, like forever. All right. You want to make sure that you're well-grounded and educated and what the conversation is around this topic. Now, also a benefit to you. I discourage people from just accepting what the current narrative about a topic or an issue is. Okay, now, I'm not saying something is wrong just because someone said so, but don't take their word for it. Look at the evidence. Look at the evidence. And if you find, and this is a good thing, if you find that the discussion around the topic is missing something, missing something big, or just flat out wrong, that's good news for you, because now you have found what we scholars call the gap between the evidence and what is said about the issue. And any place you can find a gap is a place you can step into as a researcher, as a writer, and make an impact, which is what you're looking for. Because you for whatever you do to have value, people have to read it, and it has to be of some value to them. Okay, so literature review. Beware. And Joshua, you hit the nail right on the head. A string of sort of summary paragraphs. That's an annotated bibliography, not a literature review. I used to have people do annotated bibliographies, and I don't so much anymore. Annotated, I encourage you to learn how to do an annotated bibliography. Annotated bibliographies are best for you, because if you're researching a topic and you're going through all of these sources, you got to keep all of these straight in your head. I mean, I've got a really good memory. See, all these books, actually, I've read them all, and some of them a couple of times. And I don't remember all the stuff in them. All right. But you can't see it. It's off camera here. But on the top of these shelves, I have cases and cases of those plastic boxes that you put, people put like 5x9 cards in which I've written down in summary what's in the book and their sorted out by topic and author. So if I'm thinking, okay, I'd really would like to write and explore, fill in the blank. Who said what about that? So I'll go back and go, this is an annotated bibliography. Now you could do this electronically and use like a universal search or whatever. Same thing. That's good for you. Not so good for your reading audience. Okay. All right. Question number 2. Why, according to Runyon, should we be cautious of single causal explanation regarding an individual and his or her behavior? And his/her behavior. All right. Let's see. Let's go to Camillus. Okay. A psychobiography is a field that aims to delve into the workings of individuals and the behaviors by applying psychological principles. According to Runyon, 1981, it is essential to exercise caution when ascribing a cause for an individual's behavior. This is because human behavior is intricate and influenced by factors such as genetics, environment, upbringing, personal experience, psychological processes. Right? Runyon argues that attributing a causal explanation overlooks the interplay of these factors and oversimplifies the intricacies of human behavior. Okay. Yeah. In other words, to put it in brief, and this is an excellent answer, human behavior is complicated, man. I mean, look, if you have if you look for like what the weather is going to be or something, or maybe you ask, who in your house that's cranked out by Amazon, what's the weather? It's not an absolute certainty. What you're going to get is chance of partly cloudy, blankety blank chance of rain. Well, why? Well, because predicting what's going to happen in a place where it's not happening yet, where the weather is concerned, is complicated because there are a lot of factors. They're changing. They're hard to track. The temperature's changing. The wind is changing. The barometric pressure is changing. The amount of humidity is changing, and they're hard to track. That's just the weather. When you get to people, then it's really hard to track because the weather isn't sentient. That is, the weather doesn't have an awareness of itself. The weather doesn't, suddenly veer off into left field and start behaving like, why the heck are you doing that? Okay. People do. So human behavior is complicated and it's intricate and it is rarely a single cause. Now, why do I give you this question? It's like, okay, fascinating. Who cares? Because when you're doing empirical research, and you'll see this in reading empirical research, one of the temptations on the part of the researcher is to have an explanation. I mean, this is a very human weakness. So there's got to be a reason, or there's got to be a reason that we can understand and categorize. Put into a category. It's got to be some kind of reason. Well, first of all, I'm not saying there's not reasons for things. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is beware of the human desire to have a reason that fits into a category. I mean, there must be somebody, you see this in the legal system for those of you who are looking at law. There must be somebody guilty for this. I mean, there was a crime, somebody obviously did it, and it's that guy right there. Well, maybe it wasn't that guy right there, and along comes Project Innocence. And they go, yeah, kind of the evidence says no. And, the poor guy's like, oh, great. I'm glad you exonerated me. I wish I could get back 26 years of my life or however long he sat in prison. Okay. So there's a very pronounced human behavior that we want an identifiable categoricalized, is that a word? Answer. It's okay sometimes to say, I think this is what it is, but I cannot be 100% certain. Especially in quantitative research, what you get is not an absolute, but you get sort of a probability from none to mild to moderate to high. Probability, not absolute. Human behavior is complicated. Keep that in mind as you progress through your development as researchers. Okay, question number 3. On January 6th, 2021, it is alleged that more than 2,000 peoples or 2,000 persons, I don't know why I left that blank, entered the United States Capitol building, Washington, D.C. The rioters, it is alleged, entered the Capitol building after a speech given by President Trump in which It was alleged he used 22 grammatical variations of the word fight. In March 2022, Joshua James, 34, of Abram, Alabama, a member of the Oath Keepers, pled guilty to seditious conspiracy for his party. If you were writing a research paper on the January 6th riots, would you utilize a case-oriented or a population-oriented research methodology? Yes, as some of you point out, this is in part a tricky question. Pa, let's take a look at your answer because you get right to the nub of it. Before we can answer the question, we need to define what case-oriented and population-oriented research is. Boom, baby. That's exactly what I wanted you to do. All right. I want you to know what these things are. In case-oriented research methodology, researchers are concerned with the cause of a specific case. They're asking why it happened. Your answer is a good one, but I'm going to add something to it, but let's finish it. On the other hand, in population-oriented research methodologies, researchers are concerned with the larger population patterns. They're asking what is happening. Additionally, case-oriented researchers are trying to identify values on variables or values or variables, while population-oriented researchers accurately assess the typical effect of a particular treatment for a population. Okay, excellent answer. All right, so here's what you need to know. And when you see these terms in research papers, you go, aha, I know what you're talking about here. Okay, here's how you think about it. This is how you can keep it straight in your head. Case-oriented research methodology looks at events through the lens of not exclusively, but I don't want to confuse you here. Through causing agents. Okay, now when I said not exclusive, I didn't mean like a single cause agent. Okay, so if you were to study what happened on January 6th, you might study it and say Donald Trump was the causing agent, and we're going to look at what that individual did in relationship to the other folks that were there that drove the event. So his behavior becomes the case. Okay, now it doesn't have to be a single individual. That's why I sort of pause. It can be, say, a group of individuals, an organization. Okay, that's case-oriented research. Okay, population-oriented research, all right, is where you look at the effect within a populace and what the populace did. So it's almost looking at it like cause drives the event, reception of cause drives the event. And of course, it comes down to what you see as the driving force in any event. Is the driving force in any event the causer, or is the driving force in the event the reactioners? Well, depends on how you want to look at it. All right. And it's, in picking which methodology, you're sort of tilting and saying, the one is more significant than the other. So the legal argument that some states are making, which is a very interesting one here in the School of Government. Colorado, for instance, has said that Trump violated his oath of office because he violated the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, remember, the 14th Amendment was written after the Civil War, okay? And it was written to give full citizenship to emancipated slaves. Okay. But as happens with legislation and amendments, you often get stuff that's tacked on there that's got nothing to do with the amendment. Section 1 lays out, who's a citizen, and I'm sorry, sovereign citizens, which is, legally, I'm sorry, and I'm not trying to go political here, but that's just not a thing. It just, the 14th Amendment makes it very, very clear. Section 1, if you're born here, you're a citizen. End of story. You might not like it. You might not like how the government operates. Okay, fine. you're a citizen. But as often happens in legislation as well, and amendments or legislation, there's other stuff that just gets stuck in there that's not exactly in harmony with the intent of the amendment, the legislation. It just sort of like gets jammed in there. That's the case in Section 3. And here's how Section 3 goes. No person shall be a senator or a representative in Congress or elected a president and vice president, hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who, having previously taken an oath, so oath as president, as a member of Congress or an official of the United States or members of the United States legislature, or as an executive, that's the president, or judicial office to the state, to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same government, or given aid or comfort to the enemy therefore, but Congress may by vote of 2/3 in each house remove such disability. Okay. So case-oriented, Colorado is saying, what caused this whole thing was that guy right there, President Trump. Okay. And in doing so, he violated his oath of office. And how did he violate his oath of office? Well, he violated the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment because he encouraged sedition, those people that jumped into the Capitol, and therefore he's disqualified from office, and therefore we're taking him off the ballot, both the primary, and they're moving to take him off the general election ballot in the state of Colorado. Actually, they moved that already. That case is now pending before the Supreme Court. So which methodology you pick has serious ramifications for what it is you conclude about an event. If, on the other hand, all right, they were looking at this as a population-oriented event with population-oriented research methodologies, and well, people were pretty pissed off. They were riled up. There's some evidence of actors in the crowd that may not have been part of the groups that were egging them on. We have videotape that shows Capitol Police opening the doors and letting them in, or even escorting some of them around. So this is what's to be expected from a populace when these things happen. And if we're drawing conclusions about the event, the causality of the event is contained in the nature of people when you get them together in groups. Now, interestingly, if you read the Section 3, and I encourage you to do that, pull up 14th Amendment, read Section 3. It is intentionally ambiguous because it doesn't define what act of rebellion, insurrection, or giving aid to anybody doing the same is. Because after the Civil War, they were like, are we going to hold court, and what court, and under what law, and we're going to try every single individual that was involved with the Southern secession to say, you can be a legislator, you can't be a legislator, you can be in, you can't. Hell no. Sorry, heck no. Don't worry, seditionists. We'll tell you what sedition is based on what we want it to be. And I'm not being snarky about that, but the language was left vague to give the government broad sweeping latitude to say, oh, yeah, that's seditious. Oh, I guess maybe that's not. You're in. Oh, you're definitely out. And if you're wondering what's going on, whether you support the individual in his candidacy or not, if you're wondering, why is it that Colorado's taking him off the ballot? Why is it that the state of Maine is trying to do the same thing? That's why. And it's driven by, these conclusions are driven by the methodology of how someone approaches the event, either case-oriented or population-oriented. So you see, these things are important. Okay, question number 4. According to Huntington Klein, why should a researcher be concerned about the relationship between two or more variables? And this one is can be a very straightforward answer, which a number of you are sort of nibbling around the edges. I mean, I got to be very honest with you folks. I read through your stuff, your answers, and technically you're right, but I'm not hearing your voices in there. I'm not pointing any fingers, but I'm reading a lot of cut and paste. copy and paste. And in part, I've run some of the text through some software that checks it against like billions of other sources, and I'm finding matches. Don't do that. I want to hear what you have to say. Okay, back to the question. Ashley, let's go with you. In this week's readings, Huntington Klein emphasized the importance of relationships between variables because it explains how best to interpret and understand data, particularly in analyzing how one variable affects another. Okay, so right there, that's the heart of it. As a researcher, you're concerned with the relationship of variables because it's almost circular, because that's the whole point of research. Remember what we're after all the time. Causality, 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 not correlation. Now, we can use correlation to sort of sniff out where there might be causality. Okay, and remember the difference. And remember the maxim, correlation is not causality. All right, and correlation means the events happen at the same time. That doesn't mean that the one is causing the other. All right, so as researchers, we are always trying to get at what is causing this. Okay, and coming up here pretty soon, I'm going to give you some data and then some statistical tools and ask you to interpret the results by way of causality. Okay. All right. I want to recommend a bookie for you, especially as you move through your papers and you're writing your papers. Part number uno. Okay. Because that's coming up here in about 4 days. There's a guy whose stuff I read, and I like this guy, and he's writing to not just writers, but people that have to do creative things, because writing is an act of creativity. His name is Steven Pressfield, and he's got a whole series of these little books, but one of them that you should check out is called The War of Art: Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles. And basically, he says, okay, now he's funny because he's a religious guy, he's a Christian, but he's coming out kind of sideways. He says, look, why aren't you getting the stuff done? Why aren't you writing the stuff that you need to write, that you want to write? He said, well, because you're meeting resistance. Now he embodies, he anthropomorphizes that resistance. He turns it into a thing, and he says it's an evil force. All right. This is where his sort of sideways Christianity comes in. And he says, look, this is how you get past the resistance that everybody who's in creative fields says, where you have to start with nothing, and your job is to produce a something. Okay. And now, as I've said, there's a great privilege that you get as a researcher and a writer, because you get the privilege of working on any bloody thing that floats your boat. That's rare in a job. All right. But you get the responsibility, the burden of making it relevant, making it interested, and first and foremost, finishing it, because it can't be relevant and interesting if it ain't done. All right. So if you've ever struggled with that, and everybody who's in a creative field does, read Pressfield's War of Art. He's got a whole bunch of other stuff that you can take a look at. And I found it to be helpful. I hope you will too. Okay, everybody, have a fantastic week. Work on those papers because they're due on the 12th. If you have any questions, I'm in my office tomorrow, Friday, per usual. So go ahead and call me up. Until then, have a fantastic Super Bowl weekend. Woohoo! Fantastic weekend. And I will see you next week on Canvas. Take care. Bye-bye.